Mr. de Belin has launched legal action against the NRL and the Australian Rugby League Commission, the sport's governing body, claiming they did not have the power to suspend him on February 28 and it was misleading or deceptive to claim they had done so. He claims in court documents the NRL and ARLC have engaged in misleading or deceptive conduct by making public comments suggesting they had formed a view that he was guilty of sexual assault and had engaged in conduct that warranted his immediate suspension from the club. Mr. Sullivan told the federal court Mr. de Belin was technically still able to play before the rule dictating any player charged with an offence that carries a maximum prison term of 11 years or more will be automatically stood down, comes into force. The Dragons open their NRL campaign against North Queensland on March 16, loading Mr. de Belin is seeking an order permanently restraining the NRL and ARLC from inserting the new rule into the NRL rules or NRL Code of Conduct. An interlocutory hearing has been scheduled for next Thursday when it is anticipated Mr. de Belin's lawyers will challenge the validity of both the new policy and the code's ability to ban him under it. NRL Chief Executive Todd Greenberg said he expected the new rule to be officially in place by Monday. It's the first step in the process, nothing we hadn't expected, and obviously given it's a matter before the courts I can't say much more, Mr. Greenberg said. It was always the decision of the Commission to change the policy, then to draft the rule, and that's exactly what timeframe it's happening. It will happen next week. Mr. de Belin's barrister Martin Einfeld, QC, asked the court to make a declaration that his client had not been suspended and order it be published on the NRL's website, citing comments made by Mr. Beattie that 3 players have been stood down. We put more teeth into the rules of the NRL which enable our CEO to suspend players on a no-fault basis, or until matters before the court are in fact heard. Mr. Beattie told the 7.30, arguing against the declaration. Mr. Sullivan said Mr. Beattie was announcing the rules coming into effect, which will result automatically in my learned friend's client being stood down, but Justice Rez said that wasn't the language Mr. Beattie was using. It's not as though Mr. Beattie is not an experienced man with words, having been the Premier of Queensland, he said. It is suggesting that this has been stood down and he hasn't. It would be pretty damaging to anybody. He didn't make the declaration or order a correction be published, saying there was a large number of journalists in court who had heard Mr. Sullivan's clarification. Mr. de Belin, 27, and Shell Harbour Sharks player Callan Sinclair, 21, were charged in December with aggravated sexual assault after they were allegedly involved in an incident with a 19-year-old woman in Wollongong during a night out on December 9. The men have pleaded not guilty to the charges and will next appear in court on April 17.